Welcome everybody to an introduction to the GRE test, at least in its current form. Now this video has been a long time coming because I haven't made one in maybe like 5 or 6 years, and the test has changed a little bit. I mean, not that much to be honest, it's just gotten shorter. But anyway, as you evolve as a student, I also evolve as a teacher. So regardless of whether or not the test has changed or not, this video was still a long time coming. And I hope it gives both beginners to the test and people who are already studying for it kind of some insight into how to prepare for it, what it is, how it's used, and all of that good stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into it. What we're going to be doing in this video is talking about the test itself, but we're also going to go through an example practice test so you get an idea of what it looks like. And then finally, I'm going to conclude with some tips and tricks just to get an idea of how you can approach the test from a strategic point of view. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So first of all, who are we? So I am part of a company called GregMat, and I have a perfect score on the test. So you can see that the highest verbal score you can get is a 170, the highest quantitative score you can get is a 170, and the highest writing you can get is a 6.0. Now, I don't bring this up to brag, I just bring it up so you can believe what I'm going to say. I'm just trying to, give myself a little bit of credibility. But not only that, we run a company that does what we call affordable test prep. If you go through your GRE journey, you'll notice that a lot of test prep is very expensive. Maybe hundreds of dollars a month or maybe like a couple $1,000s. We don't really believe in that. We believe that test prep should be affordable. So we have 2 plans that you can get. The first one is $7.99 a month. That includes GregMat Plus. And then if you pay an extra $2 a month, which we do recommend, you get in addition our other service, which is called PrepSwift. And as you can see, PrepSwift is an add-on service for those on the go or who need extra concise review. So yeah, so go ahead and check that out. Do your research about what program you want to get into. The good news about GregMat is if you try it and you don't like it, you can always just cancel it. You're only out $8 or $10, right? It's not that big of a deal. All right, so moving on, what exactly is the test? So I actually asked ChatGPT to give a 1-paragraph summary, and I think it did a pretty good job. I'll just read this out loud. The GRE, which is called the Graduate Record Examination, is a standardized test used primarily for admissions to graduate and business school programs, especially in the United States, which is true, by the way. If you talk to Europeans, a lot of them have no idea what this is. It purports to measure a student's readiness for graduate-level academic work by assessing verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, critical thinking, and analytical writing skills. Let's talk about this a little bit. The GRE is different than something like the MCAT, which is what you take to go to medical school, because a lot of that test will measure your knowledge, kind of like your biology and your physics. The same thing with something like the DAT, which is for dental school students. However, there is a kind of standardized test that doesn't really measure your knowledge per se. It more measures your ability to reason and think critically. The most popular ones are the GRE, which is what we're talking about here, the GMAT, which is primarily used for business school, and the LSAT, which is primarily used for law school. So it's kind of a different sort of category than something like the MCAT or the DAT. Now, all of these tests are standardized. What that means is essentially they're the same for everybody. Think about like GPA. We all go to different schools. The GPA metrics could be a little bit different. Think about something like letters of recommendation. Maybe you know a senator. I don't know a senator. So that's not a very standardized way for us to be compared to one another. So these standardized exams are, in theory, supposed to level the playing field. There's a lot of discourse out there right now that they don't do that, and that they're unfair. There is some truth to that, but I would caution us not to be too quick to get rid of them, because remember, the other metrics are even more subjective. Think about GPA. Think about all the grade inflation going on at this school, but not at this school. Think about letters of recommendation. The rich person knows all the rich people, whereas the person in the lower income class doesn't know those people. So let's not be too quick to get rid of these tests or to bash them too much, because in some ways they do actually level the playing field, but you do have to prepare for it the right way. I'll give you that. So here we go. Rather than testing specific content knowledge, remember that's what I said, the GRE aims to evaluate a student's ability to understand and analyze written material, solve mathematical problems, and articulate complex ideas clearly and effectively, skills considered broadly applicable to graduate studies. I don't think that's very controversial. There is one thing I do want to say, though. There is some knowledge aspect to the GRE. It's not purely a reasoning. You have to memorize vocabulary, number one. We'll talk more about that. And you also have to memorize the quant foundation. Think about the stuff from junior high or from high school. Okay, so let's talk about the actual format of the test. And format, what I mean by that is structure. So there's two possible orders. In order number one, you're going to first do an essay. Then you're going to do what we call verbal number one, verbal section number one, then quant section number one, then verbal section number two, and then quant section number two. Order number two is very similar with just one minor change. You're still doing an essay first, but you're doing quant first, and then verbal, and then quant, and then verbal. Pretty straightforward. Let's focus on only one order for timing, kind of to see how long this takes. So the essay, you only have to do one of them. It used to be two, by the way, but now you only have to do one, so thank the test gods for that. And that is 30 minutes. You're given 30 minutes to write that essay. For the first quant section, there's 12 questions, and you're given 21 minutes. For the first verbal section, there's also 12 questions, but you're only given 18 minutes. So notice the test makers think that the quant section needs a little bit more time per question. For quant number two, it's not 12 questions, it's 15 questions, and you're given 26 minutes. And for verbal number two, it's also 15 questions, which is 23 minutes. The test takes approximately 2 hours, and it is 54 questions long. Again, thank the test gods, because in the past, just a couple years ago, the test was almost double in length. It was like around 4 hours. So this is actually a welcome change. A lot of people are enjoying this. There is one piece of bad news, though. There are no breaks. If you take the test as it is kind of like originally intended, there are no breaks, and you have to do the entire 2-hour thing in one sitting. However, you can get accommodations. Now, what are accommodations? Accommodations are essentially things that they don't give people an advantage. They level the playing field. Like, let's say, for example, somebody has a physical condition where they have to use the bathroom. Are you really going to force them to sit there for 2 hours if they have to use the bathroom? Or what if somebody is diagnosed as having ADHD or severe test anxiety? Is it really fair to make them sit there for 2 hours, kind of like brutally, and like kind of have to navigate that? So no. Now, you can't get these just willy-nilly. You have to have like doctor's notes, and there has to be kind of a documented history. But anyway, some of these accommodations, you can get extra time, you can get bathroom breaks. Let's say you're visually impaired in some way, you can get larger text or something like that. We actually did a blog post about a guide to accommodations for the GRE. I will link that in the show notes, in the description of this video. But if you want to get a lot more information about accommodations, so you don't have to sit there like in a panic for 2 hours or something like that, please read that blog post. You'll get a ton of information on that. Okay, so let's go ahead and shift gears. Some of you watching this video are probably interested in going to business school. And you have a choice. Should you do the GRE or the GMAT? Which monster shall we slay? Well, I'm going to argue that the GMAT is kind of a more difficult beast. And it won't be like a lengthy argument, but I'll kind of walk you through my reasoning. Whereas the GRE is something that is a little bit easier to slay. Not only that, the GRE is more widely kind of used, or it applies to a greater number of programs. whereas the GMAT is strictly for business school. So if you're not exactly sure you want to go to business school, the GRE is going to be the better bet because it gives you more options. So let's talk about the comparison. So there's more differences than I'm going to show you here, but here are some key differences. Okay, so if you were to take both of these, you are weird like me. Welcome to the club. You're a weird person who likes testing. If, however, you're going to take the GRE and not the GMAT, the advantage is you can skip questions on the GRE. A huge advantage, a massive advantage, right? However, the downside is you have to learn vocabulary. If you take the GMAT, you don't have to learn vocabulary, but if you take the GRE, you do have to learn vocabulary. So what about the advantage of the GMAT in not taking the GRE? In some circles, if you're applying to business school, it's seen as maybe having more status. I think this is decreasing. 4 or 5 years ago, it was definitely true. The GRE was kind of seen as like the little brother of the GMAT. I think they're kind of more on equal footing now. The downside, of course, is you can't skip questions. Now, that's not the only downside. The math is also a little bit harder on the GMAT, but I think that's the biggest downside. What if you take none of these, neither of these? No stress. Yeah, go live your life, go have fun. Here's the downside. You might be depriving yourself of some opportunities. You know, in our world, education is extremely important. I'm not saying it always leads to a better life, but if you're smart about it, you don't put yourself into too much debt, you can really open up a lot of opportunities. So let's dive into a little bit more the problem with the GMAT. I want you to imagine you're taking the GMAT. Envision you're sitting at that computer, you're panicking. You see the first question, and it's doable. You know, you get it right, you move on. The second question's doable, you get it right, you move on. The third question's doable, you get it right, you move on. And then you encounter a question you don't know how to do. On the GMAT, you only have 2 options. The first option is you have to figure it out, okay? Or you have to guess. Those are the only 2 options. You're stuck. You're stuck in mud. You can't move on to the next question until you either figure it out or just blindly guess. And you might say, what's the problem of blindly guessing? The problem there is the way the GMAT works is you have to get questions correct and correct and correct and correct in order to get the higher scores. So if you guess here and you get it wrong, the next question is going to be easier and you go, oh, great, the next question's easier. No, not great, because that's what lowers your score in the algorithm a lot. And honestly, this can also cause almost like a sense of panic. You know, a lot of people will experience this where you come across a question or a problem you don't know how to solve, and you just kind of freeze or you panic. Now, for those of you who know about the new version of the GMAT, there is a caveat. And I do want to say it because I'm sure people will correct me. After completing all of the questions in a section, the GMAT allows you to go back to 3 questions to check them. However, I still don't find this very useful. It's tedious, it's not fluid. On top of that, going back to a question and changing the answer doesn't help your score as much as you think, even if you get the right answer. And again, the reason why is because if originally you got the question wrong, the next question is going to be easier, which hurts you in the algorithm. So this is the problem with the GMAT. Let's talk about the GRE advantage. So same thing, imagine you're taking the GRE, you get it right, you get it right, you get it right, and then you encounter this question you don't know how to do. Again, you have 2 options. You can figure it out or you can skip it. This is huge. This is huge. It lowers that panic and you can just move on to the next question. The next question is going to be the same question regardless of whether you got the previous one right or wrong, and then you can just move on your merry way. And here's the good news, you can always just go back to it. So this is why I love the GRE. It's not the only reason, but it is why I think it's a better choice for a lot of people. It's just a lot less anxiety inducing, to be honest. Okay, so how is the GRE scored? So even though they made the test shorter, they kept the scoring system the same. So here's the GRE today. So we know that there are 27 verbal questions, remember from the test format we talked about. The first section is 12 questions, the second section is 15 questions. The same is true for quant, 27, 12 and 15, the same thing. You're scored on a scale of 130 to 170 on each. So what that means is the total could be a minimum of 260, which is literally like you do nothing, or 340 is perfect. The writing is scored on a scale of 0.0 to 6.0 in 0.5 increments. So it's possible to get a 4.5 or a 5.0 or a 5.5. Let's go ahead and bring this up again. Okay, now I'm just bragging. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just bragging. Okay, the first time was just credibility, but now I'm just bragging. No, I'm kidding. Now there is a key thing here. Remember, on the GMAT, the questions adapt. So if you get a question correct, the next question's a little bit harder, and then a little bit harder, as long as you keep getting them correct. The way the GRE works is the sections adapt. So let's use verbal as an example. You're going to have the first verbal section, which is always going to be 12 questions, and it's always going to be medium. The question is, what happens in the second verbal section? What happens there? We know for a fact it's going to be 15 questions, but is it going to be easy? Is it going to be medium? Is it going to be hard? And when we say easy, medium, or hard, what we're saying is the average question. So it doesn't mean every single one of these 15 questions is hard. It just means on average, if you average all 15 questions, it comes out to a, quote, hard section. And the way they determine that is by the percentage of people who get it correct. So roughly speaking, and I'm kind of guessing here, but let's say like 50 to 60% of people get a question right, that would be medium. Let's say like 70 to 90%, that would be easy. Let's say like 20 to 40%, that would be hard, something like that. All right, so let's imagine on the first section, we got 5 to 8 questions correct. That means our second section is going to be medium. So you can kind of see where this is going, right? You can see where this is going. So if we get 0 to 4 correct, that means it would be easy, our second section. If we get 5 to 8 correct, we already said it would be medium. If we get 9 to 12 correct, it would be hard. Now you might be thinking, don't I just want to get the medium or the easy section for section number 2? And the answer is no, because if you do that, it's impossible to get a high score. You can get a pretty good score if you have medium, but if you're trying to get a really high score, you have to do obviously the first section, but you want to make sure that that second section is hard. Now, these numbers 0 to 4, 5 to 8, 9 to 12, there's a little bit of wiggle room there. It's not like ETS publishes this information. We're doing it from their practice test on the website, but maybe it's 8 to 12, maybe it's 10 to 12. There's a little bit of wiggle room there, but I think this is close enough. The quant is the exact same idea. You know, basically you can get an easy section, you can get a medium section, you can get a hard section. It all depends on how you do on the first section. So the first section, is it more important than the second section? Yeah, you could make that argument. I don't think it's like a slam dunk because the second section has more questions to it. But put it this way, you definitely don't want to get the easy section for the verbal or the quant. That is going to result in, it's going to make it impossible to get an above average score, basically. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the medium or the hard section, ideally the hard section if you're going for a very high score. Speaking of a high score, what's a good score? This is subjective. You know, a good score is whatever gets you into your program, whatever allows you to achieve your goals. But I know a lot of you are go-getters, so I'll play along. So I would say a, quote, good score starts at around a 315. And then 320, we start to get pretty impressive, to be honest. A 325, we're like, all right, this is when you start getting into kind of like you can apply to Harvard or Stanford or Yale. Now, does it guarantee you admission? No. In fact, everyone applying there probably has at least a 320, and most of them have at least a 325, but they will look at your application, basically. 330 is when we start getting into elite scores. So this is when the percentages of people who get a 330 or higher start to get quite low. And then, of course, 335 is when we start getting into like, you know, tutor level scores. Yeah, you get the idea. So it all kind of depends on what you're going for. Now, I told you Harvard and schools like that, they start at a 325. So does that mean if I get a 335, I get accepted to Harvard? No, it doesn't. No, remember, they're looking at multiple things in your application. They're not just looking at the GRE score, but it doesn't hurt. It definitely helps. Here's data actually from ETS, the company that makes the test. So this is data from 2020 to 2023, so over a 3-year period. You can see that over 1 million students took the test. The verbal average is 151. The quant average is much higher at 157. In fact, the quant is getting, I guess, not easier, but the quant percentiles, I'll show you what I mean, but basically getting a high score in quant is not as impressive as it used to be because so many people are getting a high score now. And you can see that the average writing score is 3.5. So what's like globally harder to improve? Probably the verbal and the writing. You know, that's maybe a little bit tougher for a lot of people. A lot of people have a quant foundation already. Maybe they like solving math problems. I'm not saying that's true for everybody, but I'm saying this gives you an idea of why the averages might be a little bit different. If you want to dive into more specific data, so these are percentiles. The way a percentile works is this. So let's just look at an example. Look at the verbal score for 164. Do you see where it says 93? So verbal, it says 164, 93. That means that if you get a 164, you scored better than 93% of test takers. Now compare that to quant. If you get a 164, you scored better than only 66% of test takers. In fact, if you look at a perfect score, a 170 in verbal, you scored better than 99% of test takers, actually more than that, like 99 point something. Whereas in quantitative reasoning, you only scored better than 92% of test takers. That means more than 7% of people are getting a perfect score, which is pretty insane. 10 years ago, that number was a lot higher, that percentile. And if you look at the percentiles for writing, again, if you're getting a 6.0 or a 5.5, you're doing better than 1% or 2% of people. And even if you get a 4.5, you're still doing better than 83% of test takers. If you guys are interested for a deep dive into the scoring system, we actually did a class on it, and you can check that out. I'll link it in the class, or I'll link it in the video description. So if that's a good score, what's a bad score? A lot of people get wrapped up like their emotions. It's a very emotional thing. And whenever someone gets, quote, a bad score, you know, they think they're dumb, they think they're a lost cause, they're devastated, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the wrong way to look at it. Let me kind of demonstrate with a metaphor. Can you understand that? Yes or no? No, right? That's Latin. That's a dead language. Are you going around crying for not knowing Latin? Do you feel terrible for not knowing Latin? My guess is no, right? And the reason why is because you don't connect Latin to your self-worth, to your intelligence, right? You think of it more as like just like a random skill or a random language, right? You need to think of the GRE the same way. It's a game, it's a new skill, it's a new language. If you get a 300, which is, you know, a little bit lower than average, it doesn't mean you're stupid. It just means you need to prepare for the game more. You know, try to view it unemotionally. I know it's easier said than done, but again, try to view it like golf or like basketball or like learning an instrument. Don't connect your emotions or self-worth to it too much. Here's another metaphor which might resonate with you guys. Think of it as going to the gym, right? If you go to the gym and you're weak, that's okay. You just start at the beginning and you slowly progress to heavier dumbbells, right? The same thing, you just slowly progress to heavier dumbbells. The GRE is no different. I want you to think of it as no matter where you are on this dumbbell kind of metaphor thing, you might be at the very beginning, you might be somewhere in the middle. The point is incremental progress to the goal that you want to get to. Try to separate your emotions from it and don't connect it to your self-worth. It's just a game. Okay, so if it's just a game, how do we prepare for this game? Well, one thing that's non-negotiable, you have to get the official material. This is the material from ETS. Remember, these are the people who created the test. Anything that they put out there, you gotta get. It's important. And here's what they have available right now. So this is the new version of the official guide. It's actually fatter. They actually release new questions, which is nice. This is a supplement GRE verbal reasoning practice questions book. This is an official GRE quantitative reasoning practice question book. Again, another supplement. And they also have this bad boy called the GRE Big Book, which was released like 20 years ago. It's no longer published. It's awesome. In fact, on the GregMat website, we actually are able to use these questions. So if you join us, we will be using this book a lot. The reason why it's so awesome is it's from ETS and it has 27 old GRE tests in it. 27. So it's just this great abundance of material that we can use to learn and apply strategies to. If you want a little bit of a deal, you can buy the first 3 books as a package. It's called the Super Power Pack. It's a terrible name. ETS, work on that name. But the problem is for whatever reason, the Super Power Pack doesn't include the new edition of the official guide. So I leave that up to you. Now, is it enough just to have the books? No, heck no. You need to have some kind of structured program. You don't have to join GregMat. It could be anyone. But if you are going to join GregMat, you can see that we have these study plans at the top. We have the 1-month study plan. We have the 2-month study plan. We have the I'm Overwhelmed plan. The I'm Overwhelmed plan is for people who really need to build up their quant foundation from the basics. So if that's you, I would recommend doing the I'm Overwhelmed plan for math and doing the 1-month study plan for verbal. That will leave you enough time to be flexible after you complete those plans to plug any gaps or address any weaknesses, stuff like that. What is the most common mistake in studying? So we're going to use a war metaphor. I was listening to a lot of Dan Carlin, Hardcore History, Blueprint for Armageddon. It's about the World War I war. World War I war, that's a good sentence. Okay, so the most common mistake is imagine you are in World War I and you're doing trench warfare. Do you want to shoot your artillery in kind of a random, haphazard way? Boom, 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 boom. Sometimes you get lucky, right? Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes you get a direct hit. But most of the time you're missing or you're working on things you shouldn't be working on. It's really not a great way to do your prep. A lot of people do it this way. They just randomly do this and randomly do this and do a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And before they know it, they're frustrated, they're burned out, they're not getting the score that they want. So let me suggest an alternative approach. The alternative approach, there's another misfire right there. Another one right there. Another one right there. The alternative approach is to do what's called a creeping barrage. So what you do is you attack in such a way that you miss nothing. Boom, 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 and then boom. It's perfect. Some of the stuff you might know already, but that's okay. You're just going to reinforce it. If you study in this way, you're going to make sure that you don't have all these holes and all of these weaknesses. Remember, whenever you prepare for a new skill, you don't even know what you don't know, right? It's like the Dunning-Kruger effect. I think that's what they call it. You don't even know what you don't know. So if you try to do the prep your own way, you might be thinking you're working on things you should be working on, but in reality, you're not working on the things you should be working on because you don't even know they exist. So again, if you go to the GregMat study plans, we design them like this in a creeping barrage fashion. So again, it's a really good way to prep. We like it a lot. In fact, I'll even tell you what order we teach in, kind of this creeping barrage order. So let's talk about quant first. So the very first thing you have to learn or retain or learn again or prove you already know, whatever, is the quant foundation, the fundamentals. These are the things that you actually have to memorize. So it includes arithmetic, algebra, coordinate geometry, geometry, and data analysis in that order. First arithmetic, then algebra, then coordinate geometry, then geometry, then data analysis. Once you can prove that your foundation is good, you then have to do strategies. First, are you even aware of the strategies? Remember, you don't know what you don't know. Then you have to apply them in a deliberate way, like intentionally. And then finally, we call it the toolkit. You have to be versatile. You can do it in a variety of different ways. Then we move on to untimed practice. We don't want to throw you right into time practice. It's just going to freak you out, right? So in untimed practice, we're going to start with easy. If you dominate it, you kill it. We're going to move to medium. If you dominate it, you kill it. We're going to then move to hard. You probably see where this is going. And then we're going to do time practice, again, following that easy, medium, hard kind of pedagogical structure. This makes a lot of sense to me, but you would be surprised how very few people actually prep this way. But again, it makes a lot of sense to me. Think about it like that dumbbell metaphor in the gym, right? Start with the easiest ones and then progressively get heavier and heavier. Verbal is very similar, but there's one big difference. So you have to learn vocabulary, approximately 1,000 words. You have to memorize that. Not only memorize it, you have to retain it. And we have a lot of tools on the website to help you retain it. But simultaneously, you have to learn verbal strategies. Okay. And then first you're going to learn text completion strategies, and then sentence equivalent strategies, and then reading strategies. If you don't know what those are, we will talk about those later in the video. The reason you learn these simultaneously is because they kind of reinforce each other, to be honest. You know, like when you're doing the strategies in text completion, you're also exposing yourself to vocabulary. And also, memorizing the vocabulary doesn't require as much of a mental load as the quant foundation. So that's why we do the quant foundation strategies separately and the vocab and verbal strategies simultaneously. But other than that, everything's the same, right? So the next you do untimed practice, easy, medium, hard, and then time practice, easy, medium, hard. If you're wondering, do I need to do the quant foundation? Maybe not. Maybe your quant foundation's already strong, but you have to prove it. So see these quizzes here? So these are quizzes that measure your knowledge of arithmetic all the way down to data analysis. It's a little bit time consuming, but it's worth it. Remember, take these untimed. Don't look anything up. If you look something up, that's cheating. That's not an honest assessment of your quant foundation. I will link these quizzes in the description of this video. If you don't have time, we also have this kind of like shorter one down here, which I'll also link to. All right. If you want to deep dive into the order that we do things at GregMat, we have 2 classes here. You have to be a GregMat Plus customer to see these, but if you want a deep dive, I'll link to those classes as well in the description. So yeah, the quant progression timeline, the verbal progression timeline, each one of these is about an hour and we dive into it. And then I know you probably have a lot of questions. You know, what are the different question types? How do I learn vocabulary? How many mock tests should I take? How long should I study for? I will tell you, a lot of these questions will get answered as you go through a structured program like those on gregmat.com. Doesn't have to be. Remember, we have the same goal. I want you to get a high GRE score. I don't care how you do it, as long as we are on the same page with that goal. But if you do use the GregMat program, a lot of these questions will get answered for you. So what are we going to do now? We're actually going to go through a test. Yeah, we are going to go through a test. First, we're going to go through it, and then I'm going to teach you a couple of strategies and techniques so you get an idea of, you know, what you might encounter in the GregMat program and how to approach the test strategically. So this is our 3rd practice test, full practice test beta number 3. It's free. And the reason I'm using the 3rd one is because if we burn it, so to speak, you still have the first 2. And remember, these practice tests, these third-party practice tests, are never going to be as good as the real thing or the real practice test. So even if we burn this, it's not that big of a deal. Just keep in mind, this will never be as good as the real thing or the real practice test that you can find on the ETS website. So again, look at the structure here. So verbal 1 is 12 questions with 18 minutes. Quant 1 is 12 and 21 minutes. Verbal 2 is 15 and 23 minutes. And Quant 2 is 15 and 26 minutes. And we even have the ability to put accommodations, you know, like if you want to give yourself extra time or something like that. Okay, so let's dive into it. Remember, the very first thing you're going to see is the essay. And here's what the essay looks like. So you're going to be able to type in that region where it says write your essay here. The real test doesn't actually keep track of your word count. We do that so you can get an idea of what your practice essays look like in terms of length, but it does give you a timer. You have 30 minutes and all that stuff. So if you look at this question, as societies advance, the preservation of cultural heritage becomes increasingly important, even at the cost of modern development. I'm going to give you a brief rundown about how to prepare for that or how to structure that, but let's go through the rest of the test first. But remember, this is going to be the essay. You have 30 minutes, etc., etc. So then you hit next, and you're going to get the first verbal section. It's going to give you some instructions. We didn't. We just said first verbal section. But here, take a look at this first question. This is called a single blank text completion question. Single blank text completion question. So obviously you're just going to choose one answer. You're going to read the sentence. You're going to apply a strategy and choose the answer that best fits it. Okay. If you come over here, this is called a two blank text completion question because there's two blanks, right? And if you look at the top, you can see question 2 of 12, right? Remember, there are 12 questions in verbal section number 1. This is going to be the third text completion question. Now, sometimes this could be another two blanker or it could be a three blanker. So there's either going to be a one blanker, a two blanker, or a three blanker. They usually mix them up. Sometimes they'll throw two blankers at you and save the three blanker for the second verbal section, but I'll show you. So you're going to see 3 text completion questions right off the bat. To get 1 point, both of these blanks have to be correct. There's no half credit here. You have to get both of them correct, okay? Then when you go to question number 4, it's going to be a reading question. Now, the passage might be 1 paragraph or pretty short, or it might be a little bit longer, in which case you might see a scroll bar either on the left or the right. I can't remember. I just put it on the left just to show you. And if you take a look, there's going to be more than 1 question for this passage. So this passage has 1 question, 2 questions, 3 questions. In the old GRE, when it was longer, some of the passages even had 4 questions. I think now the max would probably be 3. Okay. Now, if you take a look at this question type, I do want to talk about this question type. So let's contrast it to the previous one. In the previous one, notice you're only choosing 1. You know this. This is just a standard multiple choice question. You know this. You've done it a million times. But if you look at this one, you can choose at least 1. So not 0. You can't choose 0. If you do, you'll get it wrong. But you can choose only 1 of these answer choices. You can choose 2 of these answer choices, or you could choose all 3. It depends on whether they apply or not. You might think that these questions are easier because there's 3 choices instead of 5 in the previous one. But no, these are actually harder because if you think about it, there's actually 7 choices. Only A, only B, only C. So that's 3. A, B, AC, BC, that's 3 more, 6, and then ABC, 7. So these are actually harder questions. The next question type is what we call a sentence equivalence. Now this is also a single blanker, but instead of choosing 1 answer choice, you're choosing 2. And they have to be synonyms. They have to complete the sentence in the same way. So let's contrast that. So do you see how next to each word you see squares? Notice also that there are 6 choices. There's 6 of them. If we go back to the text completion single blanker, which is right here, notice that there's 5 choices and we're choosing only 1. Okay, so we're choosing only 1 here. And then over here, we are choosing 2 of these of the 6. Now you might think that these are harder, but actually I'm going to show you why they're not. When we get into the strategy portion of this video. So how many sentence equivalence questions are you going to see? You're going to see 4 of these bad boys. So 1, 2, 3, 4. What was there 4? Did I get 4? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, okay, 4 of them right there. So again, 3 text completion, 4 sentence equivalence, which means the 5 remaining questions are all reading. So here's another reading question. This one has only 1 question to it. Some of the passages have only 1 question. And then this one here is kind of a slightly longer passage, which also has only 1 question. So let's recap. What did we see? We saw 3 text completion, a combination of 1 blankers and 2 blankers. Could have also been a 3 blanker. We saw 5 reading questions. Some of the passages were shorter, some of them were longer. Some of them required more than 1 answer, or we had the option. And then we saw 4 sentence equivalence questions where every single time we had to choose 2 answers, 2 synonyms. Okay, so that's the first verbal section. Let's go to the first quant section. So the very first quant section the very first quant problem is going to be what's called a quantitative comparison question. And let me kind of walk you through how these work. So at the top, we have what's called given information. Now, you don't always have given information. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. In this case, we do. The given information says X is a uniformly distributed random variable that takes the first 25 positive integers. That is given information. It's true. You can't dispute it. And then quantity A is this and quantity B is this. You have to compare quantity A to quantity B. If they are always equal to each other, you choose C. If quantity A is always greater in every case, you choose A. If quantity B is always greater in every case, you choose B. However, if for some reason that they're sometimes equal, sometimes not, sometimes A is greater, sometimes B is greater, or we just don't know, we can't figure it out. I don't mean we literally lack the knowledge. I mean the way the problem is designed, nobody could know. In that case, you have to choose D, the relationship cannot be determined. And you're going to see several of these in a row. So here's the first one. Here's the second one. This also has given information, as you can see. Here's the third one, no given information. They literally just give you the two quantities, right? And then the fourth one is going to be right here, which has a lot of given information. So you're going to see 4 of these right off the bat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, quantitative comparison questions. So then you're going to get into multiple choice questions. So here's the first multiple choice question. This is a question where they give you one graph or one small chart, and there's only one question attached to it. However, in the first quant section, they're going to give you either one chart or 2 charts on the left like this, and there's going to be 3 questions attached to it. So here's the first one, here's the second one, here's the third one. And typically the third one is going to be the most difficult of the 3. That's not always true, but that's kind of how it works. And then it's going to go into another multiple choice question, and then this bad boy. What is going on here? So once or twice throughout the test, you're going to have what's called a numeric entry question. In a numeric entry question, you literally have to write the answer. You have to like type it in. Yeah, like a number. Now, not a letter or anything like that, but a number, usually like 5 or 10 or a decimal. And sometimes they even have it so you can write in a fraction. They'll have like 2 little fields. You can write in the top of the fraction and the bottom of the fraction. And it has to be exactly the correct answer to get the point. All right, so that is a numeric entry. Here's another multiple choice, and then here's another multiple choice. So let's recap that. Let's go back to question number 1. So question number 1, remember, is that quantitative comparison. You're going to have 4 of those in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we get into this kind of one-off chart with just one question. This could be just a standard multiple choice question. It doesn't have to be one of these one-offs. However, you're always going to see a 3-question chart, like kind of grouping in the first quant section. So here's question 1, question 2, question 3. Then we get into a standard multiple choice, then a numeric entry. Then we get into another multiple choice. And then finally, we get into another multiple choice. Do you remember the multiple select problems where you could choose more than one answer in the verbal? Those sometimes exist in the quant too. They're not very common, and we're actually going to see one in the second quant section. Okay, so let's imagine for both the first verbal and the first quant that we did average. We got like 7 questions correct. That means the second section is going to be medium for both quant and verbal. So I'm going to show you the medium one. Let's start with verbal. So again, imagine this is the medium verbal. So just like before, you're going to start out with some text completion questions. There's a single blanker, another single blanker, a 2 blanker, and then a 3 blanker. Remember, the 3 blanker, all 3 of these blanks have to be correct to get 1 point. All 3 of them. I know, it's kind of a pain in the ass, but that's how it works. And now this has 4 text completion questions, whereas the first section had 3. Then we go into some reading questions. Here are some reading questions. Another one of those multiple select, you can choose more than one answer. And then we get into another multiple choice question, another multiple select question, and then we get into 3 more sentence equivalents. Remember, we're choosing 2 out of 6 here. There's going to be 3 of these, 1, 2, 3. And then finally, we're going to finish off with reading. So 1 reading, 2 reading, 3 reading. And again, one of those multiple select again. So let's recap that. We'll go through it quickly because I know you guys want to get to the strategies, or at least a taste of the strategies. Okay, so again, we're going to start with text completion, single blanker. We're then going to go to another single blanker. And remember, that could be a 2 blanker. Those vary a little bit. Then we're going to get into this 3 blanker. Then we get into some reading questions, some reading questions, some reading questions. We get into 3 more sentence equivalents, 2, 3, and then we get into reading. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is you can skip questions inside a section. You can't go from section to section. So as you see me skipping questions from inside this section, that's okay. But I can't go back to verbal 1 or quant 1. Yeah, you have to stay within the section. Okay, let's go to quant number 2. Again, let's imagine this is a medium section. We did average, so this is a medium section. So it looks pretty similar to the first quant section, but there's 15 questions. It's going to start with quantitative comparison questions. So here's one of them. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. So 5 of those bad boys. 5 in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We then get into another one of those one-off chart questions. It doesn't have to be this way. That's just kind of how we structured this one. Then we get into another numeric entry question where you actually have to write the answer. Then we get into a multiple choice question, And then, remember how I told you even quant can have these multiple select problems? Here's an example. So you might be choosing only 1, you might be choosing 2, you might be choosing all 3. Here's a multiple choice question. And here's another one of these multiple select questions. Yeah, they can sometimes have like 6 of these. You can choose all 6, 5 of them, 4 of them, 3 of them, 2 of them, 1 of them. It's crazy. It's crazy. All right, so 3 more questions, 1 more multiple choice, 1 more multiple choice, and 1 more multiple choice. That's the test, everybody. That's the test. So let's go through that really quickly, and then we'll start talking about strategies. So going back through it, we start with 5 quantitative comparison, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we get into a multiple choice, a numeric entry, a multiple choice, a multiple choice, a multiple select, a multiple choice, a multiple select, a multiple choice, a multiple choice, and a multiple choice. The 2 quant sections are always going to start with quantitative comparison, right? But the distribution of the multiple select and the multiple choice and the numeric entry, that can vary inside the quant. Okay? Strategy time. So let's go back to the very first verbal slide. No, the writing slide. So I can briefly give you some ideas about how to approach the essay. All right, we're almost there. And we are here. All right. So here we go, everybody. All right, where are you? Essay. There you are. Okay. So what you need to create is just your standard 5-paragraph essay. If you went to an American high school, you know exactly what this is. If you didn't, don't worry. We have a lot of videos and kind of structure on the essay that you can watch. But what you're going to have is an introduction is your first paragraph, then body paragraph number 1, and then body paragraph number 2, and then body paragraph number 3, and then you're going to have the conclusion. I actually made a YouTube video about this, right? So I'll link that in the description for the video. But body paragraph number 1 is basically going to be reason 1. Then you probably know what body paragraph number 2 is going to be, reason 2. You probably know what this is. No, you don't. It's the concession. So this is actually the counterpoint. Again, watch the YouTube video. In the introduction and the conclusion, the most important thing in the introduction is the thesis and the outline. You know, you kind of want to tell the user what you're doing, or the reader. The conclusion has no new information. I don't want to get too much into the essay, but that's basically what it is. I'll link the video if you want to do a deep dive into that. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. All right, so the first verbal section. Okay, so the first strategy that I want to teach you about or give you a taste of is called the math strategy. So this is a strategy that allows you to attack these text completion problems and to a lesser extent, the sentence equivalence problems. And the way it works is you're trying to identify whether the ideas support each other, in which case we give it a positive sign, or whether they go against each other, in which case we give it a negative sign. That's why we call it the math strategy. We sometimes call it support contrast. So if you take a look at this sentence right here, ironically, many people in distress seek not answers, but blank, semicolon. Do you see this semicolon right here? That indicates that these two ideas support each other. So we put the semicolon in the middle and we give it a positive sign. If you look to the right, they want to be comforted no matter how trite the reassurance. We need to support this idea. So what they want is they want trite comfort. Trite comfort. Now, it doesn't matter if you consider that a positive or a negative. The thing is, you just have to make sure the first idea is the same. So let's say, for example, you consider that a negative. What's a negative times a positive? That's a negative, right? So this is why we call it the math strategy. Let's say you call that a good thing. What's a positive times a positive? That's a positive. So no matter what, the answer is going to end up being the same. So I'm just going to put the word trite comfort here. Notice I'm just supporting the idea. Okay? So in that case, which one of these matches with trite comfort? It's going to be platitudes. And again, this is why we study vocabulary. The cool thing about the math strategy is that's not the only way to do it. Take a look at the word ironically. Ironically sets up a support or a contrast. It sets up a contrast. So if we put the word ironic in the middle, like that, and we give it a negative sign because it's contrasting ideas. So they seek not answers, right? And again, you can use the but as a contrast as well. Like that's the cool thing about the math strategy. There's like multiple different paths to getting the right answer. ETS loves to do that because remember, it's kind of a reasoning test, and giving somebody multiple paths to something shows their reasoning ability. So think about this. It goes against our expectation. If someone's in distress, I expect them to want answers, to figure it out, solve the problem. But this is saying, no, go against your expectation. So they don't want answers, they want comfort or something like that, right? So that's another way to think about it. Again, another way to think about it is going to be the word but. Again, another contrast. Now, what would I do in this case? I would use the semicolon only because trite is in many ways literally a synonym for platitude. Like here, I'll show you what I mean. Let me open up the internet. Okay. If I look up the word platitudinous, which is a synonym of trite, I'll show you right here. Right there. Do you see it? Do you see platitudinous? Ooh, that arrow actually kind of worked out. So platitudinous, and do you see it's with trite? So that's personally how I would approach that problem, just because the synonyms are a little bit more direct. Okay, so moving on. What other strategies do I want to show you? Let's see. Let's go to... I don't want to waste your time too much. And remember, all of these strategies are taught in the study plans, and they really do make it a lot easier. Okay, do you remember how I told you sentence equivalence problems on the surface are more difficult than they are than text completion because you're choosing 2 out of 6? So you would think like they're more difficult. And again, it makes sense that you would think that because if you look at the number of potential options, look at how many there are. You could choose AB, AC, AD, AE, AF, that's 5. BC, BD, BE, BF, that's 4. CD, CE, CF, that's 3, and then 2, and then 1. If you add that up, what do you get? 5 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 is 15, right? So there's 15 different choices. But here's the thing. Remember, they must be synonyms, the answers. So if you look at the 6, we know minimized goes with decreased, like that, and presented goes with displayed. Enlarged and exaggerated are kind of similar, but they're not synonyms. So for example, if I enlarge my computer screen, it doesn't mean I exaggerate my computer screen, so we can eliminate that. So by doing that, think about how many of these answer choices we can eliminate. We can eliminate almost all of them except two. So this is called the pairing strategy. It's very powerful. And this is why I actually do sentence equivalence questions first. I do them first because I find them to be so easy with the pairing strategy. And now, instead of having 15 choices, notice we only have two. We either choose DE, which in that case would be displayed, presented, or AF, minimized and decreased. The pairing strategy is brilliant. All right, let's see. What else do I want to show you from the first verbal section? Okay, so let's go to this one. We have another strategy. This is a reading strategy, which is called identify sentence function. So whenever you identify sentence function, you are identifying what each sentence is doing. Not what it says, but what it's doing. And the reason why you want to use function on this one is because look at the question. Play which of the following roles. Whenever you play a role, it's not about what you're saying, it's about what you're doing, right? So look at the first sentence. That trampolines are dangerous is undoubtedly clear. So this is a very strong statement. So that's what this sentence is. It's a very strong statement. Let's look at the second sentence. One need only browse hospital intake data to see the massive number of injuries resulting from these backyard toys. That is evidence about this strong statement. So isn't that literally just supporting sentence number one right there? Let's go to number 3. But an outright ban on trampolines is clearly false. That's the author's main point, conclusion. Not because kids will simply transition to other equally dangerous activities. So the author is saying, this is not the reason for my conclusion. So let's put there, not the reason. Right there. But rather because such a ban is a patent example of government overreach. That is the reason. So think about what the author's doing here. The author's giving his or her conclusion, but not for this reason, for this reason. And then finally, what's next? Swing sets. So that's just kind of like a sarcastic comment that supports his or her conclusion. So that is the strategy, which is called identify sentence function. Again, what is the sentence doing? Not what it's saying, what it's doing. And as you can see, you can figure it out pretty easily if you look at the choices. Okay, let's move on. What else do I want to talk about? All right, so let's go to this one here. So this is another very important reading strategy, which is called sentence rephrasing. So in sentence rephrasing, you're putting the words in, you're putting the passage into your own words. The reason why we do this is because it demonstrates comprehension. So take a look. Jones is not alone in arguing that Native American pottery is precious due to its cultural significance and artistic value. So let's actually rephrase this, okay? So it's common, or at least it's not rare, for people to recognize the value of the pottery. And you can do a little shorthand, like you put NA for Native American, right there. Number 2, yet he acknowledges that much of the ancient pottery found in archaeological sites has deteriorated over time, complicating efforts to understand the pottery's original use and significance. So he argues that the pottery, I'll just put P, is falling apart, right? Making it hard to study. So making it, and again, you could put like an arrow there if you want to, making hard to study. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's almost like notes. Some historians argue that modern restoration techniques can effectively reconstruct these artifacts, providing insights into historical uses and artistic methods. So some people, I'll just put some, say we can fix it. We can fix it. Or fix them, Right. Number 4, yet he contends that even the most advanced restoration may introduce biases or inaccuracies that could distort. So, and then Jones is like, nah, not really. So I'm doing another strategy, which is called simplification here. You'll notice that I'm almost using slang to simplify it. So in the first one, that's sentence rephrasing. I'm actually being quite like specific with the detail, but here I'm being a little bit more like blasé. What's the advantage of that? You move faster. So it's like pros and cons, right? If you rephrase it, you get more of the detail, but if you simplify it, you move faster. All right. Therefore, Jones advocates for a balanced approach that prioritizes the preservation of original materials while utilizing restoration to enhance our understanding, blah, blah, blah. So basically, Jones is like, hey, let's do both. So that's it. So that's a combination of sentence rephrasing and sentence simplification. Again, why do we do it? Because a lot of people think they understand something, but they never prove it. They just do this in their head. Jones is not alone in arguing that Native American pottery is precious due to its cultural significance and artistic value, representing centuries of study and skill, yet acknowledge that much of the found. What am I reading? What? All right, again. Jones is not alone in arguing that Native American pottery is precious. So again, that's bad, right? Because you're just being a passive absorber of the information rather than an active participant with the information. So that's why the sentence rephrasing and function and simplifying skills are so important when it comes to reading. All right, that's it for verbal. Let's move to quant, some strategies for quant. Okay, so here's the first one. This is a problem where you use the strategy called no math needed. So the reason why this strategy is so important is because, remember, part of this test is about timing. And if you can find a question that only takes like 10 seconds to answer because of your math foundation, you can use that time on other questions which require more work. So x is a uniformly distributed random variable that takes the 25 first 25 positive integers. The fact that it's uniformly distributed means it's the same everywhere from 1 to 25. So 5 to 10 and 20, they're the same. Boom, takes 10 seconds. No math needed. A very nice one. There's a lot of questions on the GRE that are like that. I mean, I'm not going to say it's like half of them, but a good percentage of them are like that. You can answer them in 10 seconds as long as your math foundation is really strong. Okay, for this next one, two sides of a right-angled triangle are 12 and 5. The strategy I want to focus on here, or show you here, is what we call equal, not equal. If you can find one case where these answers are equal to each other, and another case where they're not, well, then the answer is D, right? The relationship cannot be determined. So let's see if we can actually use that here. So two sides of a right-angled triangle. So this is a right-angled triangle. If you guys don't know what that is, don't worry. You will learn the foundation. So 12 and 5. So let's put the 12 here. Let's put the 5 here. What is the area for the, what is the formula for the area of a triangle? Base times height divided by 2. So that's going to be 12 times 5, which is 60, divided by 2, which is 30. So notice we just found the equal case. But what if we put the 5 here and the 12 here? The height is going to be something different. We can use the Pythagorean theorem to find it out. So it would be 5 squared plus height squared equals 12 squared. So that's going to be 25 plus height squared equals 144. So then height squared is going to be 144 minus 25. What is that going to be? 119? Is that right? 119, in which h is going to be the square root of 1. Now again, we don't really care what this is, to be honest. We just know it's not equal to 30. Is my math right? I think my math is right. So the square root of, if it's not right, don't be angry at me. Even I make math mistakes all the time. All right, so the square root of 119, we don't have to calculate that. We know that that times 5 divided by 2 is not going to be 30. Boom, equal, not equal. We choose answer choice D. Another really cool strategy. Now, if we come to this one right here, sometimes it just makes sense to use the calculator. Yeah, you have a calculator, right? You have a calculator. So from your math foundation, you can memorize that the square root of 2 approximately equals 1.41. So this right here is going to be 2 plus 1.41, and we can rewrite it like this, 2 minus the square root of 3.141. And then once you, 3.41, sorry about that. I told you I make math mistakes all the time. So 3.41, and then you can just use the calculator. You type in 3.41, and then you hit square root, and it's going to come up with some number. And then you can put that in memory plus, and then you clear everything, and then you do 2 minus memory recall equals, and then that'll give you under the square root, and then you just hit square root button again. Yeah, it's that simple. It takes like 30 seconds or a minute, and then you're going to get some value. This is going to be 9 divided by 20. If you multiply the top and the bottom by 5, you're going to get 45 over 100, which is going to be 0.45. And I think you can find that B is bigger. I'm doing that from memory. Again, don't quote me on it. Okay, so in this case, you could just use the calculator. Why not, right? Why not? All right, let's go to the next one. The next thing I want to highlight here is something that is important, but before I do, I want you to read it. So take about 30 seconds or so. Okay. If you need more time, just pause the video. If you need more time, just pause the video. All right, so the thing I want to highlight here is read carefully. Because notice, if you look at the y-axis here, this speed is in kilometers per hour, not meters per second. So if you were to just do this quickly, so for example, you say, oh, the height is 10, the base is 12, the area is 60, 10 times 12 divided by 2, you would get the wrong answer, because the first thing you have to do is convert this into meters per second. So a lot of times people get questions wrong, not because they don't know how to do the math, but because they weren't reading carefully. So make sure you read carefully. It's not really a strategy per se, but it is something to take note of. All right, what else do I want to highlight? Let's see. Oh, this one right here. Okay. So take a look at this problem right here. So if you know anything about arithmetic, you'll notice that 3 to the 50 is such a large and insane number that there's no way we could figure this out, even with a calculator, maybe with Wolfram Alpha, which is a really powerful calculator online. So how on earth do we solve this problem? We use a strategy called pattern recognition. So let me kind of show you how this works. What is the unit digit of 3 to the 1? So we just take one element. So the unit digit of 3 is just 3. In fact, we can make a little table if we want to. So let's make a little table. All right, so imagine we have a straight, oh, that's not straight at all. That's an ugly table. Okay. There we go. There we go. Okay, so let's call this the unit digit. And then let's get rid of this line. Oops, not that one. Yeah, get used to that, everybody, if you join classes with me. And then let's call this, okay, so if we're doing just 3, obviously the unit digit is 3. If we're doing 3 plus 9, so 3 plus 3 squared, the unit digit is going to be 12, right? But then the unit digit is 2, okay? If we're doing, and remember this equals 12, if we're doing then 12 plus 27, because we already have the 12, so 12 plus 27, that's going to be 39, in which case the unit digit is obviously 9. If we then do 39 plus what's 3 to the 4th? 3 to the 4th is going to be 81. So we do 3 to the 4th plus 81. And then the 9 and the 1 are going to result in a unit digit of 0, right? And then watch what happens when we do one more. Okay, if we do one more, so the next one is 3 to the 5, right? 3 to the 5 is 243. What's 3 plus 0? 3 plus 0 is 3. Boom, we just found the pattern. So it goes from 3290, 3290, 3290, 3290. So the question is, where does 3 to the 50 land on that pattern? Well, think about it. This is 3 to the 1, 3 to the 2, 3 to the 3, 3 to the 4. I mean the last number. I don't mean that literally equals it. I mean the last number in the pattern. So that means whenever we hit a multiple of 4, 3 to the 8th, 3 to the 12th, 3 to the 16th. It's going to end in 0 if that's the last number in the sum, right? Notice the nearest one to 3 to the 50, the nearest multiple to 4 is 3 to the 48, which means this is 3 to the 49 if it's the last number. This is the unit digit when 3 to the 49 is the last number in the sum. And this is the unit digit when 3 to the 50 is the last number in the sum, right? Boom, the correct answer is 2. So pattern recognition. You can see it's kind of a reasoning test, right? All right, what else do I want to show you? That's it for quant. I think that's a nice taste of it. There's one more thing with verbal I want to show you because the math strategy is just so important. So let's do the math strategy here one more time. All right, so remember the math strategy is when you decide whether the ideas in the sentence support each other or go against each other. So let's read this. In the end, one cannot characterize the system as blank since blank, or sorry, not blank, since, comma, with enough training, it is quite tractable. So what word, phrase, or punctuation mark divides this into two ideas? It's going to be the word since, and that's a positive. It means because. Okay? Look to the right. It is quite tractable. That means it's easy. It's easy to use. It's easy to solve. That's a good thing. Positive. Positive times a positive is a positive. That means the entire first idea must be positive. But check this out. Inside, we have the word cannot. So that almost causes a little mini negative right there. So that means the blank should be positive or negative. If we want this entire idea to be positive, it means this blank has to be negative, right? Because a negative times a negative is a positive. So that's why we call it the math strategy, right? So we need some kind of negative idea. Effortless is not negative, right? Implicit is neutral. Tenuous means kind of loose, like a loose grasp. It could be negative. Aberrant means like unusual, but not necessarily in a negative sense, but we'll keep it. So let's imagine we have these three negative words. So now we have to go to a more specific guess, which we call a semantic guess. What is the opposite of easy to use? Would be like difficult, right? So here we go. Which one of these three words most closely matches with difficult? It's going to be cumbersome. Cool. I think that's it, everybody. That is the introduction to the GRE test, the structure, what the GregMat platform is all about, some various strategies. And obviously, if you're just beginning your GRE prep journey, you got a journey in front of you. And honestly, I think if you do it the right way, you will find it fruitful. You'll find it productive. You will become a better reader. You will become better at math. You will have a better vocabulary. And if you get the score you need, you will open yourself up to opportunities that can really improve your life. Woo! That was a fun, how long was that? An hour and 12 minutes. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Again, if you have any questions, reach out to us, the GregMat platform. We're more than happy to help you guys. And everyone, I hope you enjoyed this and I hope everyone has a great day.